Shoot.
All right, hitting record, hitting the start, letting everybody start rolling in. All right, so good morning. Day one of Rock the Year presented by Juicebox. These weeks just excite me because I know based on the conversations that I have, even a month later, the impact the speakers have on the recruiters. Whether it's a new tip, whether it's a way to change their desk, whether it's something that they picked up that has really moved them personally, moved their business, moved their desk. Because as recruiters, we impact people's lives day in and day out. So, real quick, just to make sure I got the chat working because I keep on breaking it, feel free to drop your LinkedIn profile in the chat if you want to connect with other recruiters that are just excited about rocking the year. Fingers crossed, I actually got it not broken. All right, there we go. There we go. All right, so I am super excited to have Aaron share with you guys. Aaron is actually somebody I feel like we've known each other for a few years now. He is one of the people that I respect the absolute most in the recruiting industry. And he's also one of the people that I'm like just trying to constantly get him in front of more people because more people need to hear what he has to say because he can absolutely change the game and change the desk. So, Aaron, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me. Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. And it means a lot to me, the relationship that we've been able to build together. I think about over the last couple of years and just watching what you're doing evolve within the community of recruiting. And it's amazing, man. So kudos to you for putting this together. Thank you for having me speak this morning. I'm honored to do so. And with that, let's get into the talk. So this talk's not probably going to be for everybody. What I've learned over the years is that you can't be for everybody as a leader or as a person. You need to be uniquely you and not a watered down version of yourself. And so while I hope today resonates with you, I understand that it may not be for everyone. But for the people that this is for, the people that feel this conversation about your mindset, about your mental toughness, I hope that it resonates with you and it helps you in your business and it helps you in your life. So let's get into it. Why is agency recruiting not for 9 out of 10 people? What's the reason? The reason is rejection. Rejection is the number one thing that makes this industry tough to be in. There's other things, but it's number one. You see, in baseball, if you can bat 300 consistently, you'll be in the Hall of Fame. And the same is true in contingency agency recruiting. If you can go 3 for 10, 300% on your fill ratios, or 30%, on your fill ratios, you are going to be in a position to be very successful within a year. If you can do that over time, over and over again, then you're going to be immensely successful. You're going to build a great career. And so let's talk through this because I think we've all heard that before, some kind of form of that. We all may know that to be true. But what are the stages of recruiting that are hard for us to overcome? What are the stages in the job? And so first and foremost, it's your early parts of recruiting, the early stages of recruiting when you first start. And where does the rejection come from during this time? It's from the candidates you talk to. Maybe you're entering the recruiting industry and you're in a sector that you're talking to candidates on, you know nothing about it. And the only way that you have to learn is to listen, is to fail forward, and to learn from your mistakes. Well, it's at this point that a lot of people decide recruiting is not for them because they're uncomfortable with going through the process of being rejected and not knowing everything. So how do you overcome that? You do it with reps. Well, what happens in recruiting if you move into sales? It's the same thing. It's more intensified. I think the only area where you experience more rejection than straightforward like recruiting would be in sales. And then that intensifies when it's in the recruiting industry. We're going to hear from some great people this week, and I'm all for tools and technology and things that make us getting to the call, the art of the call, help us be more successful with that. So please take this within context that you should be working on ways to improve this, on ways to speed up wins, on ways to see less rejection. But I'm still a big fan of doing cold calls. I think it's just a part of your tool belt, something that you should do in the process of selling and recruiting. And so when you're cold calling and recruiting, specifically as the time goes by, you might make 100 cold calls and get rejected 100 times. And again, I do think you should use those other tools. But what's important about that process, about doing at least some of that, about having that on your tool belt, is that you will get wins from it. And in the process of doing that and feeling that rejection, you have the opportunity to learn. And so over time, you get in rhythm and you get better and better. And something that once was hard for you becomes easier. It becomes more attainable. It becomes more straightforward and more process-like to how you're going to get to a result. So still to this day, I may make a cold call and it may go poorly for me. I may not get an instant result out of that. But I know over time, if I do 50 cold calls or 30 cold calls or 100 cold calls, I can spit out data points that are going to happen on that. And I can build a pipeline of what might not be business right now, but business for the future. I'm a big proponent in the recruiting and sales business of making sure that you are in a position where it's never a no, it's a not now. We don't have no's in recruiting, especially on the sales side. We have a position where someone takes a no for now. There's always the ability to reach out to them again, to learn from what they said to us and come back to them with another solution. These are parts of the process. It's part of what makes it fun. So what's another stage where you're going to experience a lot of rejection? It's going to be when you start to build a team. This one gets a little more complex because when you add people to things, they naturally get more complex. And so not only do you have to start to develop in other people these first two things that we talked about, but you have to develop as a leader. And so that's a lot of new things going on at once. And that's the last point that I want to make. But building a team is not easy. It's worth it, but it's not easy. And part of the process is leading yourself and setting the example for others that it's okay to fail, it's okay to experience rejection, and that you're going to learn from those things. And that it's through those learnings and situations that you go through that over time you get better, your team gets better, you evolve. And so really the last point I want to make on this would be anytime that you're in a new market, a new sector, you bring in a new person, anything new in our industry, you're going to experience the highest points of rejection. And so just knowing that and embracing it starts to put you in the mindset of being ready and able to work through that. You have to prepare yourself mentally for that. Okay. So now I want to tell you a story. And it's a story about 3 recruiters. Recruiter 1 had a polished background. And this is a 9-year story. So let's look at this. This is over the last 9 years. So recruiter 1, polished background, has a degree, has some industry sales experience. Okay. They, I believe, had come from the payroll, area. So not quite our industry. This is a real story, by the way. Come from the payroll industry, have the degree, have some sales experience, show some polish, and okay, that's looking good. Recruiter 2 has some sales experience, is outgoing, has kind of the energy that you look for in a recruiter or a salesperson in our industry. And then there was recruiter number 3. Recruiter number 3 had no experience, came from the landscaping industry, and didn't even know how to to put together an email. That's right. When they came on, they couldn't put together an email. They had to be taught how to do that and had to develop that skill. So you snap forward almost 9 years later, and what's happened in this real scenario. Well, recruiter one spent about a year with us in agency recruiting and has gone on to do some good things in automotive sales. They ended up going to work for one of the clients that they were making placements for. And that's a reality to what we do. Sometimes those things happen. And I wish that person well. They're doing a great job. And I think that's a good thing that could come from you building a team, is that whether people are going to develop with you or they develop and move on, the key is that they're developing and that you're helping them grow. So recruiter number two, the one that had some sales experience, that had some energy, that had potential. There's a lot of people that have potential. And I'm not going to use this person's name because it's not important. This isn't meant to embarrass anybody. There's many stories like this. But this person spent less than 6 months with us and has gone on. I went on, I looked at their LinkedIn. Again, I'm not going to use their name. And no one's really going to be sure of who this is, just to be clear. But they've had over 10 jobs in the last 9 years. And so that's another scenario, is that what we do is hard. Anything you do is going to be hard. At some point, I hope that you commit to something, because it's when you constantly stop, and start again, and I think we get ourselves into trouble. And I think that this really stems from our mindset. Now, that's my opinion. It doesn't have to be yours, but I found it to be true over and over again. So let's talk about recruiter number three. Recruiter number three that couldn't read or couldn't write an email and get it out to a client or to a candidate when they started with us. They didn't know how to use a computer completely. What's happened? Well, they became able to do that. They became able to make placements. They reached their first contest as a recruiter. They got promoted into account recruiting management and started doing sales. They learned from their mistakes. They've taken promotions and then moved back into other roles. They've reached 6, 7 contests at this point. And now today, again, I said this is real life, and you can look them up if you want, maybe shoot them a shout out. But so Jamie Platt is still on our team today and leads the largest business unit out of our whole portfolio of companies. Now, how does this happen? When someone comes in, they don't know how to use a computer or an email. They don't have any of the tools, the intangible tools necessarily right out of the gate that you would look for. How does that happen, that they ascend, over that timeline of 9 years? Well, it's your mental toughness and it's your mindset. And that's why this talk is important, because your mindset is your choice. The ability to be coachable, adaptable, show hunger, and put it all together, not just once, but time and time again, is the reason why Jamie has ascended into that role. I mentioned that at one point in the process, this was 4 years ago or so, we promoted him, and then we ended up taking a step back and putting him back into a sales position. And this is something I'll forever be proud of him for, because he had a choice at that point, and it was a big one. He could kind of buckle under that, become a victim, get into a situation where he saw all the negatives within that and decided to give up. Or he could listen to what he had to work on, take the coaching, go out and improve every day. And that's what he decided to do. And so now he leads our largest business unit within the whole portfolio. See, all along the way, these little wins compound. You learn from your failures. And I believe that there is no luck. So what do you know? At the end of last year, in the fourth quarter, we won a big contract staffing program in engineering. And we were looking around, and we had kind of 2 different teams that we could deploy that project to. And we decided that it needed to go to Jamie. And why was that? It's because Jamie was ready. And what happened next was, over 90 days, We placed 50 engineers on this program, and it's still growing today and becoming one of his business unit's best clients. Not only are we working with them, but we're now referring them to other clients, and they're referring us to people as well. It's a great story, and some would look at that at a surface level and say that Jamie got lucky. But I would say it was all those other things compounding over the 9 years that put him in the position to be ready to strike for that moment. And so that's what I recommend for you. Don't focus on being lucky. Focus on improving. Focus on the little wins every day that we can make. It might not pay off today, but if you stack those little wins over time, it's going to have big impact on your life, on your business, for yourself, and for others. Next thing I want to talk about is something tactical to give you guys. And this is something that I use every day, and I highly recommend that you use it in your world too. Hopefully you can apply it not just in work, but in life, because I think it's important in both. But so write this down if you have a pen or you're typing as you go. And what we're going to talk about is the power to reframe. We want to reframe what happens, outcomes in our life. And essentially what we want to do is understand that no matter what happens to us, and yes, there always are a few exceptions to this, and understand I'm aware of some things that I just can't necessarily explain that happen in life. But for the most part, if you have that in your context, that there are certain things that can happen that are not necessarily explainable or tough in the moment to explain, understand that most things, there's something good that comes out of them, even when they're really hard, even when we don't maybe see it in the moment. How many of us have been in a situation where something that was really hard for us, something that we didn't want to go through, something that we felt like it was us against the world, where when we look at it years later, it became one of our biggest blessings in life. Now, I happen to think that's God, working, within us. Maybe you believe in that, maybe you don't, but at least understand this principle of the power to reframe. And so not only do we want to do this, be able to reframe things in our mind for what's good about this. So here's a quick example of how to do this. It would be when something happens to us, it's not happening to us, it's happening for us. But what is happening? Hey, I didn't win this account. Hey, we lost this placement. Hey, this person got a flat tire. Hey, we proposed this client and we didn't win the project. Our competitor won the project. Okay, well, there's parts of that are tough. But what can we learn from it? What can we work on improving? What was the reasons why we didn't win or the outcome didn't go as we wanted it to? And we want to apply those things. Now I'm going to give you a sports analogy. You look at a quarterback. Quarterback throws an interception. Well, the best quarterbacks can reframe things quickly. They can get right back out there and get back to it and work their team down the field for success. They don't pout, they don't sulk, they don't have their head down. They're not worried about the last play. They're looking forward. Same's true on the other side of the football field, the cornerbacks. Short memories is what we talk about. You hear announcers talk about that. And so that short memory is a version of what I'm saying, is that you reframe the situation. So a cornerback gets beat, for a touchdown or on a play. Well, they should be back on the sidelines immediately working, looking at the tape, thinking it through, understanding their footwork. Did they take a wrong turn? What happened? What's going on with the play, with the movement? Like they're evaluating in real time what's happening. And see, we're talking about, you look at like the NFL, they're performing at an elite level. And so their ability to do this, to reframe with speed being the key, becomes very important. And the better you get at doing this with speed, the more successful that you're going to be. If you want to be elite in whatever you do, and we're talking to 900 recruiters, this week, so let's talk specifically recruiting. If you want to be elite, you got to get good at this. You got to work on it over and over and over again. We got to work at reframing things that happen to us and figure out what's good about them, figure out how it can be used for good. So the other example I'll give for the basketball players out there would be a point guard that turns the ball over. Well, you immediately got to get back on defense. And if you sulk and they score, you've doubled down on your problem. Well, that's a great example in life. A lot of times something goes not our way and it gets us off rhythm. It gets us out of our process. It takes us out of the fundamentals. We start to cut corners. These things accentuate our problems. They don't help us through them. But when we learn to stop and look at a situation immediately and then reframe it for what's good and what we can learn about it, we put ourselves in a better position to move forward, get better, and advance. Sometimes you can do that right away, and sometimes it can take time. But one way it won't happen is if you stay with your head down, if you go in the corner, or if you give up. So use that. I use it every day. I'll give you an example, another real life story of this that happened over a period of time. So we have a business unit that supports the whole country. And we had the ability to work on a program that was a pretty big project for us if we did it right. And so this was years back, I think about 4 years ago when we first started working, with this company. And we got a contract staffing program with one of their locations. They have multiple locations. And we completely failed on it. It was tough. We saw the opportunity. I'm sure all of us have had opportunities that we see and it doesn't come through. And some of that is frustrating. Now, I shake my head when I see the posts out there on LinkedIn about people complaining about candidates or clients, because I think they fail to miss this principle in it. One, you choose who you work with. You choose who you work with. And if you don't like the way it's going, you have the ability to not work with them or to work with the client on how you could do it better. And so here was one of those opportunities for us. What was happening is there was a broken process. We were putting a bunch of candidates into the mix. We're talking hundreds of candidates into the mix. And I think we got like 2 or 3 hires out of it over a 90-day period, maybe a little bit longer. It had not gone well. And we could have ran away and just gone on to the next client. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we do in recruiting, is that we have the ability to work with so many people on the agency side that we don't value the lifetime relationship of the customer. And I know this is something that I really had to challenge myself on and improve on. And it's part of our growth over the last 5 years, is that we truly value that. And it's not that I would say it out loud prior to that we didn't value that, but it's something that we've got way more intentional on in the last 5 years. And I look back and I don't think we did that all the time. I think we just look for the next client, our first 5, 6 years in business. And I'm not really proud of that. So what do? Well, you evolve and you change. So back to this situation. So it's not working after 90 days. We've dedicated tons of recruiting hours to this thing and got 3 starts out of it when we're supposed to be projecting over 100. And we were able to sit down with the client and give some feedback in regards to things that were making it tough to work through the process. We're getting things stuck in onboarding because it was taking about 3 weeks to get someone started in roles that were on the floor in an industrial plant. And normally we would like to see placed either that day or within 24 to 48 hours. And so we gave this feedback and it was not poorly received, but nothing happened, immediately. We even stopped working with the client for a period of time. But we stayed engaged and we understood that it wasn't a no, it was a not now. And about 6 months later, we had the ability to sit back down with some of the executive leadership from their corporate office and present the same feedback in the form of a proposal on how we would set up the program, on how we would control more of the onboarding process and move things quicker, through the funnel. And we decided that we would try this out in one of their locations. Over the next 90 days, what a difference. It worked. We improved the ratio of time where it took to get people into the door from the time they were made an offer to when they actually started. We improved some of the training setups. And what happened next was we launched this program nationally in 17 different locations across the country. It's turned into what's become a whole new service line for our company. We have a team of 12 that works specifically on that, and more people within that business unit that focuses on that service line and providing that service to customers. And none of that would have happened if we had the mindset that we should just throw this situation away or throw this client away because they're not behaving how we want them to behave. You see, we have expertise, we have knowledge, we have a value to provide to the clients outside of just having someone show up on the floor. And sometimes it's providing that expertise to show the client how we believe that things could be set up to be optimal for their organization, for their location. And it's dynamic, right? It can be different in different locations, different sectors of the business. And I think that's fun, number one. And I think that also bodes well with all the technology coming out that we should be using, that we should be implementing. But this is part of what makes us unique. This is part of what makes us different. This is part of what the art of recruiting is to really get in and assess the situation and understand what is going on, to see the field, of recruiting, of placements in an organization, and then to provide knowledge, value, data to the client and recommendations. And then hopefully success stories where you can give a story like this, or you can provide references, or I like to do a little bit of both. Okay. So now we're going to talk to a lot of the people that are hopefully on this call. So I think most of the people on this call have experienced some kind of wins, in recruiting. I would imagine if you're on here, you've either built a business, company, you're part of a team that's winning. You have a winning mentality and you want to improve. Well, what's the biggest threat to our mindset? It's success. The number one threat to your success when you start out is some of the things we talked about. But what happens when you achieve success? What happens when you reach your first goal, whatever you're shooting for? What happens when you have that success? Well, I'll tell you what happens. You might get a little comfortable. This feels better than when I had to sacrifice on income, on my car, on things that I bought, for my family or food or maybe office, space, all the above. Like this is getting more comfortable. Okay. So you get to a certain point of success and you have the ability to have some comfort. You have some ability to relax. And this is the ultimate danger zone if you want to continue to improve. The ultimate. Now understand, it's not, if someone experiences that success and they want to then move on and do other things, well, I guess that would be potentially okay. I don't believe that you can even say, I want to stay exactly where I'm at, because anytime you stay exactly where you're at, other things are progressing around you. And so I think naturally where you're at is going to erode over time. And this is why continuous improvement is so important. But the real danger zone comes here where someone is saying on the outside that they want to continue to grow, but the conversations inside their head are saying that they've been able to have some success and that they want to not do it the same way that brought them there, that they want to cut some corners. So what are some danger zone times of this, that I've seen? It's when people reach their first contest, in recruiting, when they achieve their first kind of like goal income. Maybe it's, 6 figures. Maybe it's multiple 6 figures. Maybe it's a 7-figure number. It's not about the number, it's about the goal that you're chasing, the objective that you're chasing. And so, whatever the target may be, when these targets are reached, it becomes a danger zone. I want to read you guys something um, that pertains to this. So this is someone I look up to in the mindset side of things. He's Michael Jordan's strength and performance coach, Kobe Bryant's, Dwayne Wade's. So that's a pretty good track record. His name's Tim Grover. And so here's what we got. Here's a myth: winning being a permanent condition. Winning is not a permanent condition. See, what you got to watch out for is when people win and they consider themselves winners. See, the truth is that you win and you go straight back down to the bottom, and you have to repeat the process. You win, you go back down to hell. You win, and you go back down to hell. So I'm going to read this direct quote from Tim's book. And before I do, so I remember the first time I read this. I was in my office at my house. Nice office, nice setup. And I'm sitting there in all my comforts, right? And we were on a good run. And I had mentally overcome, some of the stuff that we're talking about. And I read this, and I literally, by the time I was done reading what I'm about to read to you, I was weeping with tears. So I'm going to read it real quick, and then maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. So this was directly from Tim. How can you get stronger? How can you be more resilient? How can you come back to win again? You have to go back to hell, because that's where it's going to make you stronger. That is where you understand what winning is all about. The things you had to overcome. Are you willing to overcome them again? Because once you have won, once in order to win again, you cannot come back the same. So you have to take that trip back to hell where things started so you can understand it. So you can understand that feeling, so you can see it, so you can think about it. It is a trip that goes back and forth, back and forth. And too many times, the reason you don't win again is that you are not willing to take that trip back. I'm going to read that part again. Too many times, the reason you do not win again is that you are not willing to take that trip back. True champions, true winners that win over and over again, they know that they have to take that trip. They actually look forward to it because the taste of winning is so great. But the only way they can taste it again is to take that trip back to hell. So I read that. The first time I read that, the reason why I started crying like a baby is because I found that to be true in my life. And I've lived really every side of that. To give you a real life example with this, I think there was only one time. So we've had 2 years. So Spark Talent, which is our largest company and the one that's been around the longest, we've been in business 11 and a half years. And we've only had 2 years where we were down in sales. And the first time that we were down in sales, it was in 2016. So a quick snapshot of this was in 2014, we had grown the company over 800%. The next year, we grew only 100%. And this is where some of the problems started. And then in that 2016 year, we were retracted by about 25% from where we had gotten to. And I'll talk about like success loops and like that is like part of the process. But I don't think I've ever said this on any talk that I've given, any podcast that I've done. I don't think I've said this specifically. So here was the conversation from what I recall back in 2015 with myself. I knew how hard it was as I was looking at our goals for 2015, and we set some big goals. But I sat there and had a conversation with myself in my head. And I remember thinking about how hard 2014 had been. The year before, we had just, really started the company. I had gone through some legal stuff and switching over from that company to the company I had before. And that, took a toll, on me mentally. And we worked through that. And, we exploded, throughout the year. But on the first half of that year, we were still losing money. And then we just took off, towards the end of Q1 and didn't look back and had our best year ever. But I sat there, and it must have been late December of 2014, prepping for our offsites where we get ready with the team. And I looked at what we wanted to do in 2015, and I wrote down all the things we wanted to do. But the problem was not what I wrote down. The problem is that I was lying to myself in my head. I told myself that essentially I could stop doing some of the things that brought us success, in the past year, and that I would delegate some of that to other people. And the biggest person you got to watch out for is yourself. You can sell yourself, but you got to be really careful about how you talk to yourself, what you say, that you don't lie to yourself, that you don't cut corners. And this is a mindset and mental toughness thing. You see, at that point, I was not ready to take that trip back to hell. And it took the whole next year, even though we grew 100% again, as we got into 2016, the first half of the year, you could clearly see that we were struggling to grow at that point. And things were not going the right direction. And so it happened to be the year I got married. And, so I had a lot going on, personally. But so at the same time I just got married, we had realized that we had made some mistakes and that we were cutting some corners, that I was cutting some corners. But that's where it started. There's other things, but it started with me. And I had to have a conversation with myself. And what it led to was I went back into day-to-day sales at that time, that I was present in the office fully, not for 40 hours a week, but back to what I was doing before, which was locked in, ready to go, leading by example on all fronts. And I had to prepare myself to kind of go back into that. I also had to prepare my wife, and kudos to her for sticking with me on that. But I knew what it was going to take. And I'm grateful now that that happened, because I was unwilling to go backwards and to fail on the mission that we're on. But I think it took a little bit of that. And it took the mistakes of thinking that I had the Midas touch, the golden touch, that just because we had won, we'd win again and I could do things differently. I couldn't have been more wrong. And so that's why I got so emotional when I read this for the first time, to the point where I was weeping, because I've known it to be true. I knew that I had to take that step back into the bottom to hell and work our way out of there. And what do you know? We achieved, our next big goal the following year. And we've gone on to do some great things. Now we got a long way to go, a lot to improve on. But that mentality hasn't changed since. And I'm grateful for that. It's not the easiest thing to do, to gear up that way. And you got to decide if that's what you want to do. That's where this might not be a talk for everyone. So I want to finish this up with a couple more thoughts from the book and another maybe quick story on it, because this book is called Tim Grover's Winning. It's one of my top 10 favorite books. If you haven't read it and you want to work on your mindset and have a high performance, I highly recommend that you do. I recommend it to all of our operators. It's a book that I read once a year, and I just listened to the whole thing on like 2 or 3 speed yesterday, and I wanted to specifically make sure I spent some time on this part as I shared it with you guys. So one more thing to share from the book, that was a plug for Tim, though, so there you go, Tim. Tim asked athletes and business people to describe winning in one word. And instead of reading on, I decided to shut the book and think about that for a minute. And it made me emotional, again, thinking about that. I'm like, what is the word? And I came up with everything. Everything's the word. And so I opened the book back up, and he talked about, some of the stuff, like the token stuff you hear, winning's great, winning's awesome, it's the best. And then he focused on, what do the elite performers say about it? What do top business people, people that have built billion-dollar, plus companies, what do they say about it? And I don't have this down on my notes here. I'm going to do the best I can to rattle off a few of these. So some of the things that those people said is that it's nasty, that it's difficult, that it's relentless. I don't recall off the top of my head a few of the other ones, but they weren't cushy words. They were things that make you know that, to really experience winning over and over again, the mindset that required, it's not an easy thing to do. It's discipline. That was one of them. Okay. So I got to the end of that, and one of the guys that Tim coached was Kobe Bryant, and that's someone. I'm a Pistons fan, so when we beat Kobe in the finals, that was awesome to me. And like during his career, I wasn't a very big Kobe Bryant fan, but it's after his career and after I've got kind of more ingrained in the business world that he's come to be one of the most respected, people that I look at. I like reading on Kobe. I like watching, anything on him, and it's because of a mindset. He calls it the Mamba mentality. That's a mindset, and so something that made me feel really good as I read through this because I took my time to shut my book is I looked at it and Kobe had said winning is everything. And that made me feel good because that is the type of person that I want to model my life after when it comes to how to achieve a relentless approach to it and understanding that in order to win and win over and over again, it's going to take everything. Thank you for listening.
Man, talk about powerful, like 40 minutes. Aaron, thank you so much for sharing that. And
You're
also on
welcome.
top of that, thank you for, sharing you personally behind the scenes. Not, many times like, I'm in the podcast world, we talk about the success, we talk about the highlights, but we don't talk about many times the story of how somebody gets to where they're at.
Yeah.
So real quick, drop in the comments an emoji or something that you got from this talk. Because I'm seeing people like talking about deep, talking about actually somebody just watched The Last Dance with Michael Jordan. And if you have any questions, make sure to drop it in the Q&A so I don't lose them in the comment section. Powerful. Thank you, Aaron.
Welcome.
And this is maybe a question more for me. Like, you
Yeah.
have multiple companies that you're in charge of. You're in charge of plenty of people. How much time do you still spend for yourself learning and getting more knowledge that you can apply?
That's a good question. I'd say it goes in spurts, in some ways. But I'm always reading or listening to podcasts. Like I listen to yours, Ben. I have some other ones that I listen to, but I'm generally reading at least one or two books at a time. Now, I'm not, uh, I don't know that there's anything wrong with this. It just doesn't work for me to read like 52 books in a year and have them be different books every year. I have books that I like to read over and over again. And then I do think new stuff comes out that's good, or like, like I'm reading some AI books that are probably the second they were published, they were outdated. But like, um, there's stuff like that like I do think you want to be learning from new stuff and integrate some stuff in. But I'm a big proponent of like, I want to go back and read something again and I pick up new things. I understand it deeper. I've had more experiences and so, like, this is a book that I read, every year. It's the one that I mentioned. There's some other ones too, but so a lot of time on that, and then I'll go through seasons of going to events. I didn't do any of that last year because the portfolio grew to seven and I wanted to be in proximity of what we have going on. Um, at the beginning of this year, I did a speaking event on site, and that was fun. And so I'm in a season where I'm doing a little bit more of that now, and I've added a couple people to like my like mentor, list that I meet with weekly. So I'm in more of a season of doing more of that this year compared to last year.
Somebody asked, what would be your number one tip to help mindset when things are not going great?
That power to reframe is the number one thing. Work on that, get good at it. Um, Force yourself to, like, it'll feel weird at first, but it's like when something bad happens, like hey, okay, like acknowledge that you're frustrated with the situation or that like the current outcome is not favorable, but what can I learn from this? What lesson, is can I be being taught, by this? How could this help me improve? Hey, this is coming up because of this. Like, can we put a solution, against this? And I'm not going to say that every time that happens, that turns into this like great solution. But I shared an example of where a lot of people would throw that client relationship away and just move on. And we hung in there. We took our lumps on some of the feedback that we got. We gave some feedback, respectfully, and over a period of time, it turns into a whole new service line for us and a way for us to listen to clients and say, you know what, contract staffing isn't right there. We need to deploy this service in this situation. And I think that comes through, this power to reframe. So that's the number one thing that I will work on because you've been on this call and some kind of issues come up for you whether you're watching your email and then you hopefully get the recording, right? So that you can go back and watch this again, which I recommend either way, because just like books, like going over and over again, like plug for Ben real quick. Um, Getting the recording of this, it's like when I find something I like, I need to watch it a couple times. And then maybe this is not the most efficient way, but I'm going to write it out, then I'm going to type it out, and then I'm kind of going to sit in it. That's my process. So but the power to frame is the number one thing, that I would add.
Now, I know one of the things you definitely talked about was the danger of being in the comfort zone. Like, how do you recognize that you're hitting that comfort zone before it's too late?
Well, I think every time you have a big win that you're chasing for, a good process to deploy would be to sit there and think this way, because that's what's going to happen. You're going to maybe it is, I rattled off some first contest goal. It could be buying a house or buying like a car. Or maybe it's taking a vacation or whatever it may be. Like we're chasing something, right? But when you catch what you're chasing, like, okay, what are we doing now? And some people don't figure that out, and they start to get stuck. It starts to get stale, or they start to lose a purpose that they once had. And again, I don't know that, if you don't want to chase the same thing, that can be okay in and of itself. The worst form of that is when you say you want to, but you're unwilling, your actions say different. And so I think every time that you achieve, if you got in the process of doing this, take an hour, take a half day, take a day and really think about that. I mean, we have kids, Ben, so thinking about taking a whole day to do that might be tough. But I know you run, and sometimes you run with Gabe. But you might take, like, I like to do this when I'm moving. So for me, it's walking because I don't love running as much, but I like walking outside and moving, and I'm thinking about this and something about your body moving that you make better decisions. At least that's what I've been trained and what I've seen to be true in my own decision making. I'm more creative.
Well, your gym time is my run time.
There you go.
I've seen you in the gym, definitely doing the 75 hard days.
Yeah.
What do you like when you're looking back on your journey and your story to where you got here? Like, I know mindset's everything, but how did you go from like you've always had this incredible work ethic, but how did you compound that work ethic into the goals that you've achieved nowadays?
Well, I think part of it is setting up like what you want to do next. I think part of it is being in proximity of people that you admire, you want to be like, uh, and that maybe is the example of what you want to build. And so that's why I think stuff like this is so good for the community. Um, and there's there's always someone better than you. There's always room for you to improve, right? And then there's the situations where it's like you can over compare. And I think comparison can be the thief of joy. But if used properly, you can look at someone's situation, you can try and model it. You don't have to copy it specifically, but you can take things that you see in them that are you admire. And I'm stealing this. This is not me directly. I actually heard this from one of my mentors at Milet, is that you're seeing things in that person that you believe or want to have, in your own life. And so you don't necessarily have to copy those things, but you can look at that and you can kind of frame out what that looks like for you and use your own unique talents and skills to model that behavior.
Yeah,
And I think that's easier to do if you put yourself around like-minded people.
so true. And I got one last question for you. Like when it comes to your goals, like how clear are your goals?
Crystal, they need to be. So they need to be as specific as possible. So I can sit here and tell you that we want to have 13 companies within our portfolio, that we're going to create 100,000 opportunities a year. I could rattle off the sectors that we think, but that gets a little too, like, sometimes you get a little too granular and you got to be like, hey, what's the big mission? Be really specific with it, right? And then what can you do within that to, like, hey, like, it's going to evolve and change. Like, none of us know what recruiting is going to look like in 3 years. So I'm already in that mindset. Like, we're learning. And that's why you should listen to the talk next, as well, because we're going to learn a little bit more about some things that are going on right now and will be coming up. Our team is going to be listening to it. So again, a plug for Ben, but that's because Ben's putting on a great event. If I didn't feel that way, you wouldn't hear me say that, but that's how I feel. So we got to be flexible enough to evolve how we get to the journey, but the journey, where we want to go needs to be crystal clear. So you do that by setting clear, specific goals. And it's like, Ben, if you want to lose 10 pounds, you want to write down exactly that. Hey, I weigh X and I'm going to weigh X. And if you could put a specific date on that too, the more specific you can be, the better it's going to go. Maybe it's a time in your running. I want to run this time, this length, this time by this day. Like, it's got to be that specific where we get ourselves in trouble. Now that's hard, right? Because there's pressure on you. There's pressure on you. And so it's okay to have some pressure on you. It's okay if you don't reach all of your goals and objectives like when you set them. But that's not an excuse to not make them specific, because when you get vague, that's where dreams go to die.
And this is for everybody that's listening. The first time I interviewed Aaron was right when I started the podcast about 4 years ago. And during the interview, he said that at that point in time, he only had one recruiting company under his umbrella. He was like, you know, I don't know what the question was, but he was like, to everybody, said it publicly on the podcast, I'm going to have 7 companies underneath my umbrella. And then fast forward, we've been following each other, chatted for a few years, had him back on the podcast again. And then it was just randomly in the conversation. It's like, oh yeah, we're at 7 companies underneath the umbrella. And I was just like, mentally blown away by like what he said as the goal was so crystal clear. He put in the work behind the scenes that he achieved exactly what he said he was going to achieve 4 years prior to that.
Yeah, that was funny because I didn't even recall saying that at the time. And that was, I think, before us still being coached on how to do that so specifically at the time. And I've spent the reason why I know that specifically now is because I've spent the time to sit down and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. Now, it can evolve, right? But like right now, like, it's crystal clear on where we're going, how we get there. There's multiple avenues there and they're changing every day.
Yeah, so definitely, a few things. Make sure you connect with Aaron on on LinkedIn. Make sure you actually also follow his podcast, Sparking Success. It's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, pretty much everywhere. Like, if you want the inside mind of Aaron, it's right there.
Yeah, we talk. EJ and I have fun on the podcast, and it's been fun to do because we get to go into some of these things deeper, right? And then we bring on great guests that have actually, done certain things, not just theory. Our goal is to bring people on that have experience doing things and then can teach that to others so that we can maybe model it.
The podcast is called Sparking Success. Somebody just asked that in the notes. But for everybody that's still here, do me two favors. One, shoot Aaron a message on LinkedIn. Hey, like let him or shoot him or any of the speakers that you see this week that made an impact. Share with him exactly what you got out of it. And also feel free to share like publicly on LinkedIn, like, hey, like I learned X, Y, and Z. I'm adding it to my desk. I'm adding it to my life because I'm excited to take this year and rock it out. So, Aaron, I just want to say thank you. It's been a pleasure. I love being friends with you. I love seeing everything that you're going. And I know that you're one of the people that can have a huge impact on people's lives. So, thank you for sharing today.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me on, and best of luck the rest of the week. You're going to have a great event. You always do, and I'm excited to listen to some of the other speakers.
All right, guys, keep crushing it. And I will see you guys shortly.
Thanks, all.